Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham, here in Gorbridge in the southeast of Scotland, the capital of the world, the capital of the universe, the capital of the galaxy, the capital of everywhere. Really? I'm kidding, really. I always say silly things like that, but hello and welcome to the show. I hope everybody is doing well and has had a good week. Been a great week here, but you know, UK-wise, across the whole UK, it's been a little bit bittersweet with the death of the Queen back on September 8th. And I've talked about that before. And it's the Queen's funeral tomorrow. So tomorrow is a public holiday for everybody in the UK so that we can all, you know, participate and all of that and be involved. So, yes, so tomorrow I am not working. My kids are not at school. My wife is working because she works as a midwife as part of the UK National Health Service. So life has to go on there. And so she is working, but I'm not. So, so I can actually have a little bit of a later night than I would normally have. But I just nearly knocked over my cup of tea. Let's not do that. That would be very bad. In fact, I think I've just spilled some. Yes, I have. Oops. What was that music? Elevator jazz? No. Thanks, Dave. I should put you on timeout for saying such a thing. No, I'm kidding. That music, my intro music, is a piece of mine that I wrote way back in about 1991 called Flip Flops, which I wrote for my my jazz quartet. It's based on the chord changes, loosely the chord changes of Gershwin's I Got Rhythm. So yeah, so that's the intro music, if you've ever wondered what it is. And that was recorded by my quartet that I had back in the 1990s. So yeah, that's that. So I hope everybody is doing good. And it looks like Billy Morgan was the first in the house, and he was exceedingly early, having kind of come in and said hello at like about almost 2.5 hours before showtime. So well done to him for being the first one in. And let's see, Tony Stringer was the next one in the house, followed by Ronald Figura and Kevin's Guitar Stories. And Paul Morgan is here, Christina, I should say, is here. And Just Bob is here, Bobby Booth is here as well, Lollipop Gill, Don Oliver, and Billy Morgan. I've already mentioned him. Cleon Richardson is here, and Dave Bops NY is here. Andrew Lamb is also here. And Bob says, "Is good, I was just messing." I know you were. John Lake is also here. He says, "Going to keep an eye on you guys." Yes, thank you. And Papa Raptor Music has just walked in as well. So we're beginning to gather a small but very cozy wee crowd. So we've got about 16 people in here, which is low for a Sunday Night Live. But yeah, it's been a busy weekend for me. I spent the weekend with my parents, the kids, and myself and my wife. We went to go and stay over with my parents, and they do an acoustic music night on a Friday night in their local town. So I went and played some upright bass on that, which was nice. I've not played upright bass in years, so it was fun to go and play some upright bass on some blues and some folk kind of songs as well, which is kind of a little out of my wheel. I mean, I do blues regularly, but certainly the folk stuff is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but it's good fun to do. And, you know, my parents have quite an eclectic taste in music, so it's good fun to play some different types of music, which is great to be able to do that. So, yeah, so playing upright bass is something I've not done in probably about 25 years. So it's handy that I play fretless bass. So I don't have that issue transitioning to an upright bass where I suddenly go, oh, there's no frets. Where do I put my fingers? So yeah, the only thing is that obviously the action of your fingers is this way rather than this way. So I have blisters in parts of my fingers. I never thought I would ever have blisters. But hey, it was fun. And I borrowed an upright bass to do that gig. And I think I might be thinking about buying one again. I did used to have one about 25 years ago or so, which due to the humidity of where I lived, the wood got very, very dry, and then it would get moist, and then it would get dry again, and eventually it just exploded. And, you know, an upright bass is probably worth about £20,000, $30,000. And so I never replaced it. I went and got an electric bass. And then, of course, I started playing funk music, so I learned how to slap. And played a fretted bass for quite a long time, until eventually I went back to fretless, which was maybe about 2014. I went to a fretless bass. And so that's kind of my bass story in a nutshell. But you guys didn't really want to know about that, I'm sure. All right, Secret Squirrel is here, and I think that's it. I think that's everybody in for the moment. So I've got a few mods, which is cool. Now, we do actually have a question already, which was Ron Figura's question. Let me go to that question. He says, what is the best #1 place to start when learning music theory? Asking for a friend. Really? I'm sure you are asking for a friend, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, even if you're asking for yourself, that's also absolutely fine. Now, music theory, there is a wealth of resources that you will find on the internet. Some of it really, really good. Some of it not so good. So you have to be quite discerning as to where you get your information from. There are universities that have course material that you can get for free on beginner music theory stuff. There are some reasonably good websites. Always check out how qualified the person is, or the website is, in, you know, the content that they create for music theory, because some of it they may not be particularly qualified, and so the information they give you will have gaps, or will, you know, they will have just skipped over some things, assuming that you have pre-existing knowledge. And you know what? Here's the fun thing. Even musicians who, you know, they play guitar, they may play piano, they may play saxophone or something else, and, you know, when it comes to learning music theory, they go, well, you know what? I know these basics, so I may as well skip over those and go to this point and then learn from there. That's a big mistake. A lot of people make it. It is a big mistake. Go and learn the very bare bones basic building blocks of how we make music. Music is a language like any other, like French or German or Italian or Swiss or Afrikaans or anything like that. It's a language. So approach it. My opinion, my advice would be to approach learning music as you would learn any of those languages. So you start with what letters make up the language, the alphabet. And then from there you get into vocab. And from there you start putting sentences together. And you have to learn tenses and grammar and all of that fun stuff. So all of that exists in music. It just has a different name. But they are essentially the same building blocks as you would for another language. I could recommend lots and lots and lots and lots of resources. I could certainly recommend the Trinity Music Board music theory course, for definite, because I used to teach that. I taught the Trinity course for many, many years. I also taught the Guildhall School of Music and Drama course, their music theory course. I taught that for a number of years. And there's a few others. There's a few other exam boards. I think Berklee School of Music also have one, which is very, very good, which you could certainly get your friend into. And, you know, Berklee has an extremely high reputation for high quality education with music, for certain. So I would certainly recommend those. But the resource I'm going to point you to is a website that I discovered not too long ago, maybe 5 or 6 months ago. And I've had the chance to kind of look over it. And certainly for learning the basics, it's a good website to start with. And I'm going to show you that just now. So let's go and get it. And it's aimed at musicians specifically. So it's called, unimaginatively, Music Theory for Musicians. So it's aimed at people who are already playing a musical instrument and maybe have been playing a musical instrument for a while. But in spite of that, it doesn't assume knowledge. It assumes that you are playing an instrument, but it doesn't actually assume knowledge that you may or may not have gained from playing your instrument. Of course, you are going, if you're a guitar player, you are already going to have some knowledge of some chords, but you may not understand why those chords exist and why they are the way they are and what the notes that make them up and why. So this is going to be really useful for you. So this is the introductory page. Ever wonder why music theory didn't make sense when you were learning it at school, maybe? Key to learning music theory is to learn and use the same systems that all musicians use. Music is a language. It has parts that make up the whole, and those parts are made of even smaller parts. This sentence is made up of words, and these words are made up of letters. To learn how to make the sentence as a whole, you have to learn the letters of the alphabet and learn how to put them into words. Then you have to learn certain words and how to put them into sentences. And interestingly enough, this is not a very well constructed sentence, but ignore that, okay? Music works the same way. You learn the alphabet and then you put these pieces together to make musical phrases, and then you put those together to make a song. So, learning basic music theory is absolutely necessary to communicate with other musicians, whether you are writing a song together, whether you're playing a show on stage, or just jamming at the house. We have to know how to talk about what it is we're playing. Fortunately, it's actually the bare bones basic essentials of music theory is easy to learn. It's much easier than you think. And a lot of people, when you say the words music theory, they think you're going to blind them with technobabble in some kind of Greek language that you don't understand. No, that's not how music theory works. And if you're starting at that point when really all you're getting involved in is just a jam session, then really you're in the wrong place, to be honest. So the alphabet is like the English alphabet. It is a system of letters that are assigned to represent sounds in music that we call notes. This is the simplest part to learn, and everything else will be based on this. So start here. And then it goes into a little bit about scales. And scales are basically just taking the letters and taking these pitches that we've discussed here in the alphabet and arranging them in an order that works for a particular tonality and a particular key. And then it talks about intervals. So the distance between, a G and this E, that's a major sixth. Or that G to a D is a fifth. That is a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth, depending upon your outlook on life. That's a perfect fourth, major third, minor third, minor second, major second, minor second, octave, major seventh, dominant seventh, and so on and so forth. So that's what intervals are. And then chords are basically how you combine those different intervals together to make harmony, which is where you're playing more than one note together, like a G major, C major, D major, C major, G7 right there. And these are important because you need to be able to talk to a guitar player, and you'll say, hey, I will play this little bit after this particular chord, for example, which is kind of something that they cite here. Key signatures are important because you need to know what key you're going to be in. Are we going to be in G? Great. Okay, I'm the trumpet player. That puts me in. I have to play a tone up, so that puts me in A. Then the alto sax player has to play in the key of E. That's fine. That makes everybody agree. because that's how transposing works. But that's kind of another part of this, and it's covered in this website. So they've got worksheets, they've got some practice tips, they've got the Nashville numbering system, circle of fifths, they've got stuff on scales, reading music, intervals, transposing, arpeggios, modes. They got some really, really useful stuff in this website, and they've got a bunch of ebooks as well that you can get. And then there's some videos, which you might find useful. There's a basic section, an intermediate section, and then a whole bunch of topics as well. So I recommend that you check this website out. I'm going to link it and put it in the chat here. So we'll paste that. And I would definitely recommend you go and check that out. So go and check this website out, Music Theory for Musicians. I think it's going to be useful to get you and your friends started in learning the bare bones basic music building blocks for making music. And then you can transition from there to, you know, much more advanced music theory concepts, some of which I talk about either here on Songwriting Simplified. So, but that was a really, really good question to start with, for sure. Okay, let's go see what else there is. Let's see what else we got. Lollipop Kilt says, Berkeley offers theory for both guitar and piano-centric players. Absolutely, it does. Yep. And Rich Cresswell, aka My Prisonis, is here, which is awesome. Let's see. Let's see, what else do we have here? Cool. Okay, you guys are grabbing that link and you're saving it. Cool. Excellent. So it's a really good place. And Music to Motion is here. That's my good friend Mike. Awesome to see you, Mike. I hope you're doing well, mate. So yeah, this is a really useful place to get started with learning music theory. And you can just take your time going through it. You know, just like you do when you're learning French vocabulary. Don't just learn it rote fashion. Don't just learn, you know, okay, this is this is that, that is the other. And it's therefore, it is just so. No, experiment with it. Try it out. I mean, that's how I learned. I learned mostly by listening and then dissecting. Just, you know, picking the notes out on the piano and working out how they, you know, how they relate to each other. What sounds good, what doesn't sound good. And eventually some of the things that I initially thought when I was first starting out didn't sound good, now do sound good because I can understand how I can make those things work better than I did when I first started out. So, you know, and of course, the more you get into this, the more, like any language, the more fluent you become, the more you can communicate and the more complex things you can talk about. So, you know, when you're first learning French, you're learning how to say hello to each other and how to say what your name is and how old you are and where you live and where you're from. You know, that's basic information. And eventually you can get up to talking about, you know, French nationalism or French foreign policy from the 19th century onwards. And, you know, stuff like that. Those are more complex things. And music theory and music as a language is no different. You know, you start with basic making sounds and then making those sounds make sense and then making those sentences bigger. You turn them into paragraphs. You turn them into talking points. You start to learn how to discuss things. You start to learn how to express your opinion. You start to learn how to express yourself artistically and, you know, make your character and your personality come through. It's the same with music. First off, you start parrot fashion copying people. Or at least this is how I learned. You know, I learned by listening to Miles Davis and Charlie Parker and John Coltrane when I was a kid, and Dizzy Gillespie and people like that when I was a kid. And just trying to learn their solos because I loved the way that they improvised. And so I would pick some of their phrases out and I'd go, oh, that sounds really, really great. And then I'd work out, what chords it fits with and where it doesn't fit and things like that. And eventually I started moving away from just playing Charlie Parker licks and eventually got to making my own thing out of those phrases. I would maybe put those phrases somewhere that Charlie Parker never put those phrases and make them into something new. And I learned how to express myself. I learned how to make my personality, my ideas come through. And so that's how you grow, learning music theory. It's actually easier than you think. It really is. A lot easier. Let's see. What do we have here? Bobby Booth says, I need all the help I can get for this old brain of mine. Absolutely. Now, here's the thing. Learning stimulates your brain and keeps your brain active. It keeps, your brain is a muscle. It needs worked. It needs to be worked all the time so that it stays fit and fresh and healthy. And so as you get older, and if you keep an attitude of learning throughout your whole life, then when you are old and you're in maybe the end stages of your life, maybe you're, I'm not speaking for everybody here, but, even when you get to your 80s and 90s, you can still learn new things, providing you've kept your brain active and agile throughout up until that point. I think it's a good thing to do. I mean, I'm a lifelong learner. The thing with music theory and music in general is that it's an ongoing learning experience. There's things I learn all the time. There's new things I discover that I didn't know about before. There's new, there's new performing artists and there's new songwriters and there's new composers that I find out about all the time. And they have a different way of expressing themselves. They have a different approach to music that I had never heard before. And I go back to doing what I did when I was a kid. I put on their records and I start picking out things that they are doing, things that I'm hearing. I start picking them out on the piano. And then I start going, okay, so how does that actually work? How can I... And then once I've got to the how that actually works, my next step is, how can I make that mine? How can I take that phrase that I have heard this musician play that I like, and I now know how it works, what it is made up of, what the ingredients are to make that phrase. How can I make that mine so that when people hear me play it, they don't hear this other musician, they hear me, they hear my personality, they hear my way of playing it. And that's the next step. And that's the important thing that I think musicians need to do. They need to, at the moment, there is this kind of disassociation. There's playing music and then there's music theory. And some people think that these two things are opposites and should never meet. That you either make music or you're a music nerd and you study music and you don't make music. And, there are people that go, hey, I just play instinctively from ear and from memory. I don't need to learn this stuff over here. And the people in the other side of this go, well, hey, I study and learn and dissect how these things are put together. I don't need to play instinctively. Wrong. You need both if you want to be a good, well-rounded musician. You need to understand all of these building blocks to make you better at what you do over here. What you do instinctively should be informed by what you learn over here. And then the two should talk to each other and make sense to each other. And I'm getting a little bit preachy, so I'm going to stop. I know. I preach on Sundays, and I need to learn when to not preach. Okay, so there you go. That's my take on the importance of music theory. Let's see. Manariga is here. Hello. I don't think I've seen your name before, but I'm glad you're here. That's fine. Mika is here as well, and he says flexible minds don't start with a negative attitude towards new and different things. Liberal definition, willing to respect or okay, yes, being open to new ideas is actually really, really important in order for us to learn. An interested, inquisitive mind is really needed to learn new and complex theory. Not either of those. Preset 7 will do. Yes, preset 7. If you do not have preset 7 in your life, you are missing out. You are absolutely missing out. For sure. And as Lloyd Popguild says here, she says, your brain is a fatty, gelatinous lump of charged circuitry in need of constant pruning and upkeeping, like a fruit tree. Absolutely right. Like a fruit tree, like a well-kept garden. In order for it to be healthy and to look good and for you to want to spend time in it and admiring it and also reaping those, reaping the fruits from that tree, you got to keep it healthy. And that's where learning is important, particularly when it comes to music, learning to be better at what you do. It's an ongoing journey. Nobody ever actually arrives at, hey, I have arrived. I have completed being a musician. I have beaten the big boss at the end and I have completed being a musician. No, nobody has. Not even the great geniuses of music ever reached the end, because there isn't one. It's a constant journey of discovery and application. John Coltrane is a very fine example of this. He was a voracious learner, and there were always new things that he would discover. He would hear another musician play, and he would say to that musician, hey, teach me how that, not just how you play that, but teach me how that works. And then he would take what that person taught him and he would practice. He would practice for hours and hours and hours, voraciously. And then when he played gigs, he would start introducing these new concepts. And the cool thing about these new concepts is when he was introducing them, they were fully formed inside of him, because he was able to take those things that he learned from others and make them his own. And the place where he did that was in the practice room. And that should be the case for all of us, really. That's where everything is distilled. So music theory isn't something that is just over there for nerdy people. And I just play my guitar by ear or from memory. Playing by ear, playing from memory is an essential skill to being a musician. Absolutely essential. To be able to play by ear, to be able to play from memory is essential. It's a prerequisite to being a good musician. But also having some grounding and roots put down, using that tree analogy, roots put down in music theory is going to help you be better at the playing by ear and the playing from memory. Because when you're playing by ear, you're flying by the seat of your pants. But if you fly by the seat of your pants with some knowledge, you can fly better. And you can fly higher, you can fly faster. And you'll find, if you're only playing by ear, or if you're only playing by memory, you'll find that your development will come to a certain point that you can't get past. And you'll be banging up against this brick wall and you'll be like, how can I go past this? How can I get over it? How can I get beyond this point? Music theory will help you do that, because it will help feed and give you strength so that you can go over that block. So there you go. Andrew Barr is here. He says, hey, what's up? Good to see you. Sorry I've missed the last few Studio One meetups. That's no problem, mate. They are entirely voluntary and you can attend whenever you're able to. It's cool, but I'm glad you're here. And just so that you know, the next Studio One meetup is going to be on Friday, the 30th of September. So just over 2 weeks' time. All right, so it's not this coming Friday, but it's the Friday after. And it's going to be great. So that's for the Studio One meetup for the UK and Ireland. And of course, like all the other ones, you don't have to be from UK and Ireland to attend. You can just turn up. Doesn't matter where you're from. Usually we have a mixture of Brits, Irishmen. We have people from the United States, Canada. We've had people from Israel. We've had people from Australia before, even though their time zone is kind of like 12 hours opposite from ours. We still have occasionally had some Australians turn up. So yeah, they are very, very cool. Can we discuss drop 2 chords, triads, and more complex chords? I'm not really sure what you mean by drop 2. You're going to have to explain what you mean by that, because that's going to mean different things to different people. If you're talking about inversions, then yes, we can talk about inversions. What's an inversion? Inversion is where you take the 3 notes or 4 notes of a chord, or however many notes there are in a chord, and you change the order that those notes are in. And the reason why inversions exist is to make it easy for the voicing of those chords to move smoothly. If I play this voicing here, this is a C major triad in root position. We call it root position because the root is at the bottom. So we've got C, E, and G. Now if I want to go to an F chord, I can leap up here and then go back down. And then if I want to go to G, I have to go all the way up there. Now, that doesn't sound very neat. And as you can see, if I try and play it at speed, it's not so easy. I'm going to make mistakes. However, if I try and find the nearest next door neighbor note for each of those 3 notes in the chord, we can make it easy. So I can go C root position, and then I can move my top 2 fingers on the E and the G. I can move those up 1 note, and now I have second inversion F major, and it's so much easier. And now I can play a nice bit of blues, just going from the C to the F. Now, if I tried to do that in root position, it's not so easy. So that's why that works really well. Now, if I wanted to go from C to G, I could keep the G at the top and move these 2 fingers down 1. And all of a sudden, that kind of riff is a lot easier to play. So, and you can apply this to more complex chords. So, major 7s. So, what else? What other inversions do we have? We have root, and then we have first inversion. This is where you move the C up an octave and put it on the top. And now we have the 3rd at the bottom. All right, so that's first inversion, then second inversion. Let's take the E, put that on the top, and now we have the G at the bottom. So we have the 5th at the bottom. All right, and you can do that for any triad. So you'll have 3 inversions. The more notes you have, the more inversions that you will have. So if I take a major 7th chord, for example, C major 7 in root position, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. And so the more notes you add to the chord, the more inversions you are going to have. Essentially, that's how inversions work. I'm not really sure whether that's what Ronald was asking. Oh, he says yes, inversions. Yes. So the more notes you add to the chord, the more inversions you will have, because it's the same as with math. If you take 4 numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, how many different orders can you put them in? There's a certain limit. If you have 5 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put those into as many different combinations as you can. How many combinations are there? There's a certain limit. And so it is, the more notes you add to the chord, you know, the more inversions of that chord you're going to be able to play. And so that's how that works. And, you know, it still works even if you're working with, like, you know, let's take a really complex chord. Like this one here, C13 sharp 11. So I'm playing this with the 7th at the bottom. So this is 4th inversion. There's one inversion. There's another one. There's another one. There we go. And then this one. And that'll be kind of root position. Alright, so there's, you know, lots of inversions with that particular chord. So yeah, so I hope that answers that question. That's a good one. Let's see, what else do we have here? John Hawk. Hello, John. Good to see you, mate. He says, what's a good plug-in chain for vocals? And should you use them whilst you are recording? Good question. Now, there is a problem inherent with such questions, you know, when it starts is, when the question is, what is a good ... Like, what is a good guitar? What is a good cricket bat? What is a good fence? What is a good make or model of car? The problem with that is it's too abstract. It's too broad. It's too big to make it make sense. So you have to break that down. A vocal in particular is going to be different depending upon who the vocalist is. So there's not a vocal chain that is a one-size-fits-all for all vocals. It just doesn't exist. The reason why is because everybody's voice is different. Well, you know, you've got to take into account, is it a male singer? Is it a female singer? Okay, it's a female singer. Does she have a high voice? Does she have a low voice? Is she soprano? Is she mezzo-soprano? Is she alto? Which is she? And so where her voice sits in register will make a difference to what plugins you're going to use. And also how you're going to treat the voice. Is it a husky voice? Is it a clear voice? Again, something else you're going to have to consider. And the same for a male voice. Is it a high voice? Is it a tenor? Is it a baritone? Is it a bass voice? Because all of those are going to decide what plugins you're going to use. And then the next consideration is, what style of music are you dealing with? Are you dealing with opera? Are you dealing with jazz? Are you dealing with pop, rock, metal, screamo? What is it? What's the type of music that you're dealing with? Because you're going to use different plugins for all of those variables. All of those variables should inform you what plugins you're going to use. So there is no real one-size-fits-all. However, there are some things that you are going to use which are going to be probably fairly commonplace. One is an EQ, to be able to make the vocal fit inside the mix and, you know, kind of be more prominent than everything else. Because the vocal in a song is the most important thing. So you got to make it shine. So a good EQ is going to help you. It doesn't have to be a third-party EQ. It can be a stock EQ. A compressor to have control over the dynamic range, because a vocal has a lot of dynamic range. You know, a voice does. Different syllables will be louder than others just because of the way the mouth and the way the head and all the other resonant cavities work. So if, you know, and again, the style of music is going to come into play with this a lot. So if it's a rock vocal, there's going to be a bigger dynamic range. You're probably going to use something that's pretty fast. You're going to use a compressor that's maybe pretty fast and is going to be quite aggressive on the dynamic range of the vocal. So you can make it much narrower, and therefore you can have it consistently sitting on top of the mix. And maybe a good delay and a good reverb. And again, all of these things can be stock. They don't have to be third party. Everybody assumes, hey, you must have third party plugins. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have to have third party plugins, especially if you're new to mixing. I would say avoid third party plugins if you're new to mixing, and learn how an EQ works. What does it do? What do the band controls do? What does the Q do? Learn all of that stuff. And then, again, what does a compressor do? What's its actual function? And then how do each of the parameters of a compressor affect the sound? And what do they do to the dynamic range? And then, of course, there's different types and different styles of compression as well that you have to bear in mind. So there isn't really one size fits all compression, EQ, delay, whatever. But to get to the second part of your question, should you use them whilst you're recording? You can do. And I would encourage you to try it. Because here's the thing, if you use an EQ and a compressor on the way in, which is what we call it when you're recording, those processes are going to print. We call it printing. I don't know why we call it printing. It's an old kind of, comes from the analog days, but it doesn't make sense in the digital domain. But it's one of those things that's kind of hung over into the modern digital era. But what it means is, it means that the audio goes through those plugins and onto the audio track itself, into the audio. And so once it's done, it's done. If you go, oh, you know what? I really needed to have scooped more out of the low mids than I have done. Well, it's recorded now. The only way you're going to fix that is to go back and record it again. Or EQ it again after the fact. Nothing wrong with that. But certainly going for a sound and committing to that sound in the recording phase, I think is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of effort when it comes to mixing. Mixing will be much more about balance and faders and panning and automation and all of that stuff that's much more fun than, you know, scooping out things here, scooping out things there, boosting here, boosting there, a little bit of compression here, a little bit of compression there. It's not maybe as much fun. Whereas if you've done all of that to start with, then you can have a lot more fun with mixing if you've committed to the sounds up front. That's my personal opinion. A lot of people don't agree with that. Jonny Guy, my dear friend, definitely doesn't agree with that. He thinks that all the processing should be done in post, afterwards, because you can change it. It's never committed to the audio. And so, you know, there are plenty of schools of thought either way. But certainly you could give it a go and give it a try, for sure. And I would encourage you to do so. Let's see. I wouldn't recommend tracking your plugins live. I'd recommend carefully tailoring your chain to the vocal. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's plenty of recording engineers that would record through an EQ and even through a compressor to control, basically just tame the peaks, just tap those peaks down on the way in, so that you're not having to do that after the fact. But certainly, you know, if you're new to it, then and you're new to mixing, then, or you're new to recording and it's not an approach you've ever really done before, certainly try it, give it a shot, see, it may work for you. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing your EQ and your compression and all of your other mixing after the fact, after the recording is all complete and all done. For sure. And that's how a lot of people in the modern age, that's how they work. They just record everything pretty much as is, pretty dry, no EQ, no compression, and then everything is kind of tidied up in the mix. But I would say, the recording phase is the most important phase of production. And you should devote as much time to it as you possibly can. Don't rush it. Make sure that you are capturing the best sound you can for your vocal. Make sure you get the best sound you can get, and don't stop until you've got it. Don't stop recording, don't stop tweaking, don't stop swapping out microphones and microphone placement until you've got the sound you want. Once you have that sound you want, commit to it. That doesn't mean you have to print any effects, but commit to that sound and go, okay, we have that sound now. And then, when it comes to mixing, it's about making all of the other things fit around that sound that you've got for the vocal. And, same goes for, guitar. Spend time finding the sound you want for your guitar parts. Swap out microphones, swap out amps, swap out cabinets, do whatever you have to do to make the best possible guitar tone you can get. And then once you've got the sound that you're after, record it, capture it, and it'll make mixing a breeze afterwards, for sure. Just Bob says, gonna have to watch later, chat and YouTube keeps closing on me. Oh, really? Wow. Okay, yeah, that could be an issue with your internet, maybe locally. Let's see. Bobby says there's no right or wrong way. It's mostly experiment to what you get. Exactly. There is no right way. There is no wrong way. There is just ways that work, and ways that, they might be easier for some. They might be harder for some. And some people, they go, hey, this is my way of doing it. This is my process. This is how I go about it. And it has worked for me, so I'm going to keep doing it. And really, to be honest, that's how everybody should be. Find what works for you, what gets you to the best sound you can get, and then stick to that. But don't be so closed-minded on it that you can't adapt and learn new things. And don't be so closed on your workflow that when new technology becomes available, you cannot adapt. Or you become less willing to adapt. Oh, that's going to just mess up my workflow. No, have a flexible workflow, but have a workflow that serves the music, that serves the song, and gets the job done in the most efficient and the most high quality way possible. That would be my view. Okay, buddy. Billy Morgan says, after show Zoom 10 minutes after the hour. And he's got a link there. So if you want to join the after show party, that is the place to go. And I will be there, actually, because I'm not working tomorrow, so I can stay up later. Yay! There you go. John says, very informative. You're welcome. I am now getting into vocals, so thanks for the tips. I now have to develop an approach to it. Yeah, just experiment. And you know what? Have fun. That's the important thing. Have fun. There should be no stress. There should be no panic about it. Just have fun. Allow what happens to happen naturally. Use your ears, listen, and adjust until you get the sound that you're after. And even if, you end up kind of developing a technique that nobody's ever using, if it works, it works. Even if you've got the mic in the most weird place imaginable that doesn't make sense to anybody, if it gets the sound you want, and it gets the sound that is going to make the difference between a great song and a mediocre song, then make it happen. They did that with Kurt Cobain. There was one song I think they recorded, and he was lying on the sofa at the back of the studio, and it was just the perfect vocal sound. And they just put a mic on a boom stand over where he was lying, And that got that vocal sound, and it made that song a great, massive monster hit. And they did it with an SM57. It doesn't really matter how you get there. It's getting there that's important, and everything else is just a tool. You know, we obsess over plugins. We obsess over microphones. You know, it's not about those things. Those things are just tools. Doesn't matter whether they're third party or not. It doesn't matter whether they're expensive or not. You know, you might have a $50,000 microphone in your mic locker. Doesn't mean it's going to work for your particular vocalist. It might not. And it might be that your cheap-ass $100 condenser mic does the job perfectly. It's not that the $50,000 mic is bad, or the $100 mic is suddenly incredibly good. It's just that that mic suits that person's voice, and this one doesn't. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it's going to happen. And so, you know, these things are tools at the end of the day. Let's see. And Mika's just echoed that. He says, try different mics if you can. Some suit a voice more than others. Don't forget to tune the instruments. Yes! Thank you, Simon. Absolutely. It's really important, especially for guitarists and for bass players. Tune your instrument. You know, make sure every string is right in the middle of tune. You know, don't go, oh, hey, it's close enough for jazz. No, not good enough, even for jazz. Even for jazz, tune your instrument. Have it absolutely perfectly in tune. John Lake says, I was committed once, but I broke out. That's funny. All right, we have 4 minutes left. I have preached a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. I missed Dave's question. He says, did the band Coldplay make a boatload of tunes simply using triad inversions? Kind of. Actually, the harmonic language of Coldplay is not as simple and as straightforward as you might think. It's I mean, that's the beauty of music that sounds really, really good. And it might sound simple, but just because it sounds simple, it doesn't mean that it is necessarily. You know, I can remember listening to, I don't know, some really, really, really simple sounding pop song. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to have a go at transcribing this. I should be able to nail this in, 30 minutes. Transcribing it just from one hearing. I should be able to nail this in 30 minutes. And as I was transcribing it, I discovered actually the harmonic language of this song was much more complex than I thought. You can make a really interesting sounding song with very little effort just by not just using root notes. Chord 1, 4, 5. Everybody's favorite pop song chord changes. But if you're the bass player, that's going to get very boring. How about this? I'm doing chord 1, but I'm putting the third in the bass. To chord 4. And then when I go back to 1, I'm putting the third back in again. And then the third on the D chord, which is F sharp. Or how about just climb the bass? That can make it sound interesting because you turn a D chord into a B minor chord when you do that. B minor, A with C sharp in the bass, D, A with E, D with F sharp, E with G sharp. And you're just walking up the A major scale. Much more interesting sounding with very little effort. You're just using different notes of the chord. You know? And it just makes the music sound much more interesting when you do that. And another thing you can do, you know, this, putting the 7th in the bass. And all of a sudden you've got something that just sounds a lot more interesting harmonically with virtually no effort. Virtually no effort. Little bit of music theory understanding with inversions and changing the bass note from the root to the third to the 5th of the chord, and also maybe the 7th. But there's no effort there, and you've made something that sounds very mundane sound a lot better and a lot more interesting and a little bit more complex. And it just provides glue to your song to make it sound much more polished and a little bit more professional. All right, so I hope that helps with that. And with that, we are going to call that the end of the show. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. Let's see how many people we have right now. We peaked at around about 23, I think. No, I'm wrong. We peaked at 26, which is awesome. Thank you, everybody. And we kind of held round about 25. All right, folks. So we're going to call it there. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And I will see you on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified at 6 p.m. Central. It will most likely be over on the Home Studio Training YouTube channel. But, you know, keep in touch with me on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram and places like that, and we'll let you know where it's going to be. But most likely that's where it'll be. So assume it's going to be over on the Home Studio Trainer YouTube channel unless I tell you otherwise. If I tell you either me or my sponsor, Alps Media, says otherwise, then it will be, you know, it'll be over on Jonny's channel. All right. Good night, everybody, and I will speak to you on Wednesday. Good night.